Today on Switch to Linux, we're going to talk about Plasma and the fact that it does not need SystemD and where this might have come from and downstream consequences of people who have misunderstood. Thanks for checking out this video by Switch to Linux. If you like this type of content, subscribe to the channel if you've not already done so. Leave us a like and a comment down below. And so there is a idea going on right now that Plasma, which has a new login manager, that login manager is dependent on SystemD. And many people have started to say that now Plasma itself is strongly dependent on SystemD. Is this really the case? And this has been coming around for a while. One of the earlier articles I found on it was from January 23rd, and this is from FreeBSD, and the forum post over here is raising awareness of this. KDE Plasma Login Manager won't support SystemD, Free Linux, or BSD systems. Now, what some people have misinterpreted this to mean is that Plasma is requiring you to use the Plasma Login Manager, and that means that Plasma is dependent on SystemD. Now, SystemD has some benefits to it, and to some people it has some drawbacks. I have not heard a compelling reason why we shouldn't use SystemD, other than, yeah, it can be big and bulky, and we will look at what KaOS's statement has to be, which has to do with some of how they separate out users and roots and things like that. But from this article here, a number of people are suggesting that, in fact, down here, SystemD Free Linux cannot use Plasma Login Manager. Same applies to all BSD operating systems which lack SystemD entirely or have no complete substitute. Now, what people are thinking, though, is that this means that you can't use Plasma anymore. And on Y Combinator News, there is an article here about KDE new Plasma Login Manager tightly bound to SystemD. And this person comments to say, hey, the title makes it sound like you will not be able to run KDE Plasma on BSD or minimally obscure Linux distros without SystemD. And he says he wants to illustrate that this is not actually the case. Let's not forget that the Plasma Login Manager is brand new. We just looked at it for the very first time. Up until like all eternity until now, it ran SDDM, which continues to be supported. And the reason they moved away from that, it wasn't that they moved away from it. They just created their own. And it was something that would work with their Wayland switch. If you want my opinion, the real problem is that they're dropping support for X. Okay, that's the problem I have. But because a lot of people have been coming out and suggesting that Plasma will not work without SystemD, KaOS actually released a new version here in the last couple days, and on this they actually switch. Now remember, KaOS was entirely KDE Qt only. No GTK, no GNOME, nothing else. Everything in their system has to be dependent on Qt or it's not in their repo. And so part of that was, hey, Plasma. Well, they just dropped Plasma. And their citing for dropping Plasma is that KDE Plasma is going to be completely dependent on SystemD. So even the guys at KaOS completely missed this point. Okay, now I am going to look at their new system. I have downloaded it and I have not had a chance to install it yet. I will be installing it and probably sometime, maybe the end of the week, we'll get a chance to look at this. But the latest news, you will not find Plasma or KWin on the ISO, though KaOS has always been KDE Plasma only distribution. Instead, you will find Nira, Noctalia-based system. If I was wondering why the change has come into play, because of a desire to move away from SystemD, work is ongoing to see if a move to dint is viable for the distribution. So that meant looking for an alternative to Plasma, since Plasma pretty much demands SystemD and will be fully mandatory soon. That is wrong. False information. And it's surprising to me that a distribution like KaOS wasn't able to dig through this, or maybe didn't reach out to KDE for clarification. But no, Plasma is not dependent on SystemD, and Plasma has actually come out saying that is incorrect information. Now, of course, the latest ISO still is SystemD. Go figure that one out. But they are switching entirely to other means off of Plasma. They did say, though, that if you want Plasma, you can still install it. It's just not shipping with Plasma 6 because they are afraid that it's going to move away from the SystemD free systems entirely, and which is what KaOS wants to do. The rest of this article here is just the new changes. We'll talk about those later. But in response to this, 9to5Linux actually has an article clarifying this. KDE says Plasma Desktop will never force users to use SystemD. So KaOS, I don't know if they're going to go back on their decision or what the situation was. Maybe they had other beefs with KDE that we don't know about, but I don't know. But they say here only the Plasma login manager is dependent on SystemD, but future Plasma releases are not dependent on the Plasma login manager. In fact, the Plasma login manager is just a fork of SDDM. If you didn't look at what is your login manager, okay, let's first get to the top of the fact that most people don't even know what a login manager is. Okay, so just to clarify that, when you log out of your system and then you log in, or you just start your system up and then it's asking for your password, right? You might have a picture and a little password thing. You might have a place to choose your desktop environment. You all know that screen when you're logged into your Linux. You just type it in and you notice that some distributions it looks a little different than other ones. Well, that is your login manager. And I think there's like 3 or 4 primary ones, which I can't remember all of them. I can remember 3 of them off the top of my head. You have GDM, which generally ships with GNOME-based distributions. You have LightDM, which generally has been shipping with Ubuntu-based distributions like Ubuntu or Linux using LightDM. And you have SDDM. Generally, I've only seen this in Plasma or other Qt-heavy distributions. Well, there's a new one specifically for Plasma called the Plasma Login Manager, and it looks nearly identical to SDDM. So what difference does it make which one of them you choose to use? I think a lot of it had to do with I think they were having problems with SDDM not fully supporting Wayland, I think is what the issue was. I'm not totally sure. And the Plasma Login Manager is fully supportant of Wayland. So that really is what it boils down to. But if you're shipping a KDE build with the KDE login, the Plasma Login Manager, you will have to have a SystemD based distribution. And that really is what what they're looking at here. And so they said they've addressed some recent concerns from users that are forcing SystemD initialization system on current or future versions of the Plasma desktop. This comes after the developers of KaOS, which we just talked about, announced that they are going to replace it simply because Plasma pretty much depends on SystemD and will be fully mandatory soon. That is not the case. When asked if Plasma or its core components demand SystemD or is forced on users, KDE Project said no, except for the new Plasma Login Manager, which is not a core component of Plasma. All right, so he says, so are you forcing Plasma users to use SystemD? No, the Plasma Login Manager is one of the probably half a dozen login managers or more that can boot Plasma, said the KDE devs. We made a Plasma Login Manager because it will give distro creators a cool piece of kit that can, not must or not should, be tacked into a system to boot into Plasma. Basically, it's just, how are you logging into your system? So the KDE project said they're not planning on making any part of Plasma's core component dependent on SystemD. That will also continue to work on non-Linux systems like FreeBSD and also, of course, other Linux distributions using other initialization. So KDE will drop support for, basically they said down here, many news outlets reported that KDE will drop support for non-SystemD systems. So that really is what the controversy surrounded. So there you have it. Plasma Login Manager is dependent on SystemD, but future releases are not dependent on the Plasma Login Manager, nor are dependent on SystemD. And it would be ridiculous for Plasma to make this distribution dependent on SystemD because of how wide this desktop environment is used outside of SystemD requirements, like FreeBSD and other things. In fact, MX Linux, which has your choice of initialization, also supports an official Plasma version as well. So Linux distros that want to ship the latest Plasma will have to use a different login manager. So if you do want to have a SystemD free system using KDE Plasma, you will have to use SDDM or something else. I personally like LightDM. That's what I put on my MX box. MX came with something else, and I swapped it out for LightDM because I liked it a little bit better. So there you have it. It is not true that KDE Plasma is going to be dependent on SystemD. If people are telling you that, that is not correct directly from them. And KaOS has bought into this and is choosing to go a different direction, citing this. So we're going to have a look at the new distro. Maybe it was just time for them to make a change. I don't know. But let me know your thoughts about all this in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.